Hello, I'm Anna Delaney and welcome to the IS&G studio live at the Gartner Cybersecurity and Risk Summit in London. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Robin Das, Executive Director, Market Growth Strategist at DataBee. Robin, really great to see you.
Great to see you, Anna.
So we're talking about communicating cyber risk and value to the board. So let's start in the boardroom. Boards say they are perhaps spending more on cyber, but don't necessarily feel more secure. Why is this? And what do they really expect from CISOs?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think over the years, they've been investing more and more in these security programs. And the CISOs have been asking for more and more and communicating that life has gotten a lot more risky. But I think it's now incumbent, and I think we're at an inflection point where it's incumbent upon the CISO to actually start to communicate back to the board, like what are they actually getting for this money in terms that the board can understand. And so really trying to think about how do you meet the board where they are with sort of more of a business conversation than just like a technical conversation.
And do you see cybersecurity leaders losing focus in gaining the board's attention in those meetings, in those conversations? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the CISOs sort of come from a very technical background. And I think if you sort of look at studies, maybe, or like surveys of the board, only about 14% of the board have any cybersecurity experience. And so I think sometimes the message is kind of getting lost in the middle somewhere because, the CISOs communicating these technical metrics of catching and patching and phishing. And a lot of that jargon is just not resonating with the board, who are more used to sort of hearing, sort of regular financial metrics and just much more standardized KPIs.
We are also hearing cyber risks or being described as existential. How can CISOs leverage that greater awareness at the board level?
Yeah, I mean, a great example of why it's existential. We're here in London. Ransomware attacked Knights of Old Trucking, a venerable 158-year-old company that was suddenly taken down by ransomware. So it really is, we see a number of different companies that have actually gone out of business. This was not even a brand impact anymore. And so they've actually gone out of business. And so the CISO does have the board's attention. The question is how does the CISO communicate that message to the board?
So that brings us to reporting and outcome-driven metrics, because they're often for the bridge between that technical chat and business value. What changes when CISOs use outcome-driven metrics versus the traditional methods of reporting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna briefly, sort of outcome-driven metrics are really this kind of philosophy that you take these technical sort of impacts or these technical programs, and what you do is you translate them into a way that the board can understand. Think about like sort of service sort of level agreements. As an example, instead of how many systems have you sort of backed up today, it's more of a conversation around, okay, if we do get hit by a ransomware attack, how soon we have the systems back online. And so if you have that type of conversation, then it becomes a conversation of like, how many have we done? And you can have instead of it being a binary conversation, it would be much more of here are the dials you can turn, sort of board of directors. And, the way that we can turn that dial is money. And, what's your sort of risk framework or what's your, do you need the system up in a minute? And that's going to cost, we're going to have to turn that dial all the way to the side. Or if we have the luxury of a bit more time and it can sort of be back up in 12 hours, we can turn that dial back on the expense and the investments that we spend. Example, if it's the billing system, maybe you do need it back in a minute. If it's just marketing database, but like if it's the marketing database, well, maybe you have the luxury of like 24 hours, right?
Prioritization.
Exactly. It kind of enables you to have a sort of a really sort of, call it a grown-up discussion with the board about where you prioritize sort of, and the trade-offs between, okay, we can spend a lot of this and it kind of will get the systems back in sort of 30 seconds. Is it really worth spending twice the amount of money to kind of go from a minute to 30 seconds or are we okay with a minute?
So for CISOs, maybe making that shift from traditional metrics to outcome-driven metrics and reporting, would there be any stumble blocks that arise, any hurdles that they're best to avoid?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think the first thing to think about is like the stakeholder alignment and sort of the education of the board. So again, first bringing the board sort of getting their agreement and their alignment on sort of what it is we're talking about, and then really sort of working with the board to kind of get their input on what they sort of from this like idea of a remediation or a business continuity perspective, like what they need to kind of hear and where the board sort of wants to focus. And so I think it's really like getting that stakeholder alignment and engagement early on, and then that continuous education that is key.
And of course, compliance never goes away, particularly in the UK, EU, rules are tightening. And I think boards want to know that their security teams are going beyond just passing the audits. How do we balance that sort of outcome-driven reporting versus compliance measures?
Yeah, so I mean, it's almost become a cliche now that compliance doesn't equal security, which is true, but it really helps, right? So first of all, let's sort of not get it twisted that like, compliance is one choice and security is another choice. Like, so compliance is really helpful to kind of bring everybody up to sort of the same baseline. So it just kind of provides you that framework. I think the second thing that it provides, especially with a lot of the things that are happening in the EU sort of around DORA, GDPR, it provides a bit of a burning platform to kind of help sort of push through certain programs or things that you wouldn't have necessarily had that sense of urgency to before. But the thing that we find really interesting is from a security perspective and a compliance perspective, like the underlying data that you need for that reporting is the same, right? And it's just a question of how you sort of slice or dice it. And so for that kind of is where it gets really interesting, is that you're sort of collecting once, but it can sort of serve many different purposes.
And of course, budget talks always involve trade-offs. So how can security leaders really navigate those challenging conversations and get the resources that they need?
Yeah, I mean, going back to sort of what we were talking about at the start of this, it's all about stakeholder alignment and engagement. And so, making sure the CISO is really bringing the board along for the ride. And I think by having this discussion again about here's what you get from a business continuity perspective for this level of investment, really, I think enables, I think it really enables the board to kind of make an educated decision about what they're investing. And so maybe that makes the budget conversations a little bit smoother, because it's less about the CISO just coming back and saying like, I need more, I need more, I need more. They can now say, look, I need more to kind of drive this outcome, or I need more to drive this outcome here. And then the board can then make the decision on those trade-offs.
And finally, Robin, clean unified data is being seen as a way to cut SIM costs, speed up audits, and boost productivity. Is this showing that cyber is moving away from a pure cost center to an actual driver of efficiency?
It's a really great point. So, I mean, I think the data is going to set you free. And so when you have clean, normalized, standardized data, it enables you to do a lot of interesting things. And it's really important that you align to a data model. For example, we use the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, or the OCSF. This is an open sourced, community-led data model that anybody can be a part of. And so it means you're not locked into a particular vendor, into a proprietary data format. And it also then means then you have this clean, standardized data that kind of goes across tools. You can cross-correlate different data sets. It also enables you to rationalize your tool set. You can look at your tech stack and have a look at, what are the different tools providing me from a data perspective. And then you can rationalize on the back of that. And to your point about SIM rationalization, a lot of CISOs are faced with a challenge of like, I want to have as much coverage as possible, but to put it all in a SIM is pretty prohibitive from a cost perspective. And so by having this kind of opened, standardized data set, you can kind of choose where you put it. You can kind of put it in more sort of lower cost, sort of open source storage, or you can put the high fidelity alert into the SIM. And the sort of the benefits of that is, for example, like we use AWS. And so scaling is no problem, right? Like, so you can leverage AWS to kind of store some of that data. I mean, you can leverage other types of formats like Iceberg as well. But yeah, and our tool is also built within AWS, which means that we can then help you scale up that data collection piece of it sort of seamlessly and sort of without any challenges. And so sort of it really works for CISO at that enterprise scale.
Excellent. Well, Robin, you've shared a wealth of information for our security leaders watching this interview. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Anna.
I've been speaking with Robin Das of DataBee, and for IS&G, I'm Anna Delaney.